so much risk into the system, creating all those losses. There was a ton of fraud in the markets that was attributable to a lot of these companies directly. They all not only got away with it and went unpunished, but they almost all got bailed out. And we've seen, sort of progressively over the years that it's just incredibly difficult to audit or regulate these firms, whether it's the London whale episode. The public just doesn't have a good handle on what's going on within these giant companies. And now you mentioned again that there are a lot of similarities to the 2008 scenario, and you're absolutely right.
Matt Taibbi, what's happening right now isn't a random market downturn. It's a quiet, coordinated shift where stocks, Bitcoin, and even silver are falling together while no one in power rings the alarm. And what comes next is far more explosive than a crash. The realization that this slowdown may not be an accident, it may be the plan.
The market always eventually goes up. So yeah, there's going to be bad days, but it'll go back up. But the problem is the underlying economy in America just isn't all that hot, Like what do we really make in this country? Where's the floor, right? Like we have some industries that sort of perform well, but if periodically we go through these bubbles that are based on nothing more than enthusiasm.
Let's be very clear about this. That is not an accident. A sudden crash makes people angry. Angry people demand answers, vote people out, and force the system to change. But a slow, steady bleed, that just makes people tired. And tired people do not resist. They comply. The slow drain is not a failure of the system. It is the system working exactly as intended.
Over and over again on Wall Street, like you find some corner of the financial universe that's unregulated, and everybody sets up basically a gambling shop there, and they trade in products that the government doesn't really monitor, and before you know it, everybody's leveraged to the hilt and there's too much risk in the system, and then eventually it breaks and there's catastrophic losses and the government has to step in and bail everybody out. And that's happened over and over and over again.
Now here's the part where most people get confused. Stocks, Bitcoin, and silver are all falling at the same time, and the instinct is to look for 3 different explanations. There is only one. Liquidity is drying up. When the Federal Reserve keeps interest rates high, borrowing becomes expensive, and every investor who used borrowed money to fund their positions starts getting margin calls. They are forced to sell whatever they can, fast, and suddenly everything you thought was diversified turns out to be the same trade wearing different clothes. Diversification protects you when the system underneath it is healthy. When the system itself seizes up, every asset falls together. That is what is happening right now.
And there was all this instability in the markets, and it's been rewarded by a kind of a bailout scenario, and this time I think they're conceiving it as kind of a permanent bailout, essentially, which is unsettling, to say the least.
Meanwhile, turn on financial news and they will point at the S&P 500 and tell you everything is fine. Here is why that is a lie told with accurate numbers. The index is technically 500 companies, but it is effectively controlled by about 10 of them. When Apple or Nvidia has a strong week, the whole index rises, hiding the fact that hundreds of smaller companies underneath are quietly deteriorating. On top of that, trillions of dollars now flow into index funds automatically, with no human being deciding whether these stocks are actually worth the price. The money pours in mechanically because that is what the algorithm does. No judgment, no reality check, just autopilot buying whatever is already the biggest. When that autopilot finally meets a wall, the correction is not gradual, it is sudden.
No matter whether a company hasn't shown any ability to make money or has no reasonable profit and loss statements. It's just, if it's a good idea, the stock is sound and everybody should invest in it, and the stock market is going to continually go up, so don't worry about it. Of course, that doesn't happen. It blows up. Everybody loses their shirt. But what do? The Fed lowers interest rates, basically allows Wall Street to recapitalize, drink itself sober, and they plunge into the next.
Listen to how this moment is being described in financial media, and you will notice something. Nobody calls it a crisis. Instead, you hear soft landing, healthy correction, resilient consumer, transitory pressure. Every phrase is engineered to sound like a doctor managing your expectations rather than a patient in genuine trouble. This is not accidental. The language is doing real work. It keeps you calm enough to stay in the game, patient enough to not ask the hard questions, and just uncertain enough to assume you are probably missing something. Taming the language is how you tame the outrage. Now pay attention to what happened to Bitcoin, because this is where the plan for 2026 becomes impossible to ignore. Bitcoin was built to be outside the banking system entirely. No middlemen, no government control, no authority capable of printing more of it or freezing your wallet. That was a genuine threat. Banning it outright would have made it a martyr and proved every point its believers ever made about power fearing financial freedom. So the establishment did something far more effective. They absorbed it.
This system now of people betting on credit that is legal, which creates more losses out of thin air. So yeah, I'm terrified every time I see the stock market go up. What's it based on? Is it based on our economy actually doing well? I don't know. I don't think so. You know, I'm sorry. I look like I'm scaring you a little bit.
They approved the ETFs. They welcomed Bitcoin onto regulated exchanges. They let Wall Street build custody products and institutional funds around it. With every one of those steps, Bitcoin moved from outside the system to inside it, managed by the exact same institutions it was designed to make obsolete. They did not kill Bitcoin. They gave it a job title and an ID badge. But absorption required one more thing. The identity had to go. Bitcoin's original ethos was anti-bank, anti-surveillance, anti-centralization. That story could not survive inside a Goldman Sachs product brochure, so the rebrand happened quietly. The ethos got reframed as immaturity, mainstream adoption got sold as legitimacy, and the analysts who spent years calling Bitcoin a scam are now running Bitcoin desks at the same banks. The believers got the price appreciation, the institutions captured the infrastructure, the revolution was not stopped, it was repackaged and sold back to you at a management fee.
They worked incredibly hard to make sure that we didn't pass really, really simple laws that would have created transparency in all sorts of markets, like mortgages. They never got around even to doing something for crypto that would have made sense.
So why does 2026 specifically matter? Not because of the date, because the buffers are gone. The stimulus savings that kept consumer spending alive after 2020 have been spent down. The credit card balances that filled the gap after the savings ran out are now maxed out. The ultra low interest rates that made debt cheap and kept asset prices inflated are gone. For years, there was always one more cushion absorbing the pressure. In 2026, those cushions have run out, and the higher for longer rate environment is finally doing the damage that was always coming. The date is not special, the timing is.
Excited, but the reality is, we have all these zombie companies that essentially can barely make their own debt service. That's a fair portion of the American economy is barely subsisting. Right, so any interruption in their ability to get liquidity would be a catastrophe.
And right on schedule, as the alternatives dry up, a new generation of financial products is appearing. Frictionless, government-backed, works everywhere, easy to download in 60 seconds. What these products also do is log every transaction you make, track every pattern in your spending, and carry the technical ability to restrict your access if your financial behavior falls outside acceptable limits. Nobody is forcing you to use them, they just need to make every other option worse first. And they have been doing exactly that for years. The adoption is not forced. It is engineered through the slow removal of alternatives.
Making sure that there aren't massive, irresponsible levels of risk in the economy. And we saw with a bunch of these recent episodes that the same kinds of behaviors are happening again. And there's really nobody watching. There's nobody who's stepping in and kind of telling these companies that they can't do this kind of stuff, and that makes me nervous because it just feels so much.
And if you think the answer to all of this is the next election, consider what has actually changed across 30 years of administrations. The Federal Reserve has never been subject to a vote. The career officials inside every regulatory agency survive every transition. The financial lobbyists who write the actual language of financial legislation operate regardless of which party holds power. The underlying architecture of how money flows, who gets credit, and what obligations attach to your financial accounts has moved in one consistent direction regardless of who sits in the White House. The actors change, the trajectory does not. What makes all of this feel so immediate is that one unelected official can reprice your entire life in a single afternoon. One speech from the Fed chair moves every market simultaneously. One regulatory ruling can require your wallet to link to a government ID. One policy change can freeze your account while you sit on hold. You built your financial life on top of rules written by people you never voted for and cannot remove. Understanding that is not about giving up, it is about being clear-eyed about what you are actually dealing with.
Elections, right? And again, if you cover elections, it's incredibly boring and you never hear anything of substance and it's not terribly complicated. And, the Democrat says that, we want to help the middle class, and the Republican says we want to protect family values. And that's pretty much the extent of the intellectual challenge in terms of covering that stuff.
What's important to understand is what this moment actually represents. This is not the end of capitalism, not a dramatic collapse, and not a cinematic failure where the system breaks all at once. Those framings are emotionally satisfying, but they obscure what's really happening. What's unfolding is quieter and far more deliberate, a steady consolidation of financial power, data, and leverage into fewer, more centralized hands, while the language used to describe that process keeps it feeling technical, manageable, and non-threatening. Stay skeptical of new financial products that arrive precisely when your existing options have been made worse. Pay attention to the language being used to describe what is happening around you, not because language reveals a secret plan, but because the gap between the official words and the underlying reality is the most reliable signal you have access to.
In Washington, most stories end up coming down to issues of money. Whoever is paying for the politicians to run their campaigns, they're the ones who are going to get the policy priority, and the easiest source of cash to run political campaigns is the financial services industry, or the weapons makers, but particularly financial services. And so they get what they want.
This kind of system does not require prosperity at the individual level to function. Institutions can remain stable, profitable, and orderly even as households lose ground year after year. From inside the system, volatility creates opportunity, consolidation creates efficiency, and financial stress produces compliance. None of that depends on malicious intent. It depends on incentives that reward calm management and discourage disruption. When you view it that way, the absence of alarm bells stops looking reassuring and starts looking revealing. If this process threatened the people who design and benefit from the financial architecture, the response would be immediate and unmistakable. Emergency measures would roll out overnight, liquidity would surge through the system, and the language would flip to urgency within hours. What appears instead is calm, confidence, and restraint. A clear signal that, from the system's perspective, everything is fine, even as the real cost is quietly pushed onto everyday American people.